Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. You guys know what time it is? Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And for those of you who like these type of videos, please remember to click like down below. If you're not subscribed to my channel yet, hit that subscribe button. But on to the point, I had someone link me a video by Ethier. And every time I say this guy's name, people are like, Jason, you're saying his name incorrectly. I don't know how to say his name, guys. I'm hearing impaired. Deal with it. It's not an insult. I just get people's names wrong. I don't hear them correctly, and half the time people have crazy spellings. People get my name wrong too. Reality. Over to the point though. Jeremy did a video about why people have lagging quads, and he talked about his own experiences with growing his quads, and he pointed out he had no leg development. He really struggled even though he thought he was doing things wrong, and it's come along. And I will agree, actually, his quads do look like they've grown. And he made some good points in the video. A lot of it was largely correct, but I also think that he is way overcomplicating this. And again, it comes back over to the problem that the bodybuilding-ish world and physique world oftentimes, let's be realistic here, most people from that sort of training background are just generally lazy and they don't train that hard. It's just not the same as sports training. And that creates a lot of times this whole concept of maybe finding just these right angles and these sweet spots to do things. And that can push people, I think, into the wrong direction instead of just realizing they actually need a lot of tension and workload. And quads really aren't that complicated. And I'm speaking as someone who, a lot of people are like, wow, your quads are pretty ridiculously jacked. Because, I mean, I train pretty much in little short running shorts. So people have a pretty good idea who watch my stuff, what I'm talking about. So how do I build my quads? Lots of volume, lots of tension, and then doing specialty work to bring them up because my quads are technically a weak link on my squat. All right, so I do quad specific work to address them as a weak link. However, before I did quad specific work even to address them as a weak link, I still probably had bigger quads than most of these guys out here ever even want to get. So how do we do that? He addressed the main point, I think, which is half reps. Let's be realistic here. What is the two reasons guys struggle with quads? They don't go deep enough in their knee bending. They don't get to a deep enough knee angle in general on any leg exercise, right? Number two, they don't train them frequently enough. They do body part splits. They have a leg day. Instead of saying, well, I have 2 leg days every week because I'm on an upper lower, or most novices should be starting on a full body and be squatting every time they're at the gym. So it's usually the only 2 protocols I even generally recommend to anybody other than a tiny niche population of elite athletes would be full body 3 day a week and then eventually go over to an upper lower 4 day a week. There's probably no reason to ever do anything else unless you're just bored. But it's still not a good idea. There's other things you can do to alleviate boredom. But generally speaking, you're going to be getting quad work at least twice a week. But guys, half squatting, and I'm glad he addressed that. That's actually the number one cause. It is literally half squatting and playing around on machines to where you can do the same stuff and put things into bad angles. But the half squat is a big deal. I've actually seen studies over the years that have looked at when you have lifters doing 10 rep sets basically to failure. So taking it to failure, you would think if a lift taken to failure should recruit all the available motor units in theory. But when it's been looked at with half squats versus full squats, it wasn't half reps gave you half the gains, it was half reps gave you a quarter of the gains. I saw one to where they had measured total muscle growth in the guys over the course of 10 weeks who did half squats to all the way to limit sets, the heaviest weight they could handle, which is going to be more weight. Like in this case, he showed with a full squat versus a half squat, like the work sets were 112 pounds versus like 170. It was like 60 pounds difference, right? And those are still really, really, really light weights. Like, I hope that wasn't a male study. But over to the point with that. The ones that I've seen have shown literally a fourth of the muscle growth. So it's not even half gains, it's a quarter gains. Well, I mean, if you're gaining a quarter of the muscle possible in your quads, they're obviously going to be a lagging muscle. And really the quad is not that complicated of a muscle. The quad's really no more complicated than your tricep, right? And we know how to build triceps. Again, you get the deep knee angle, right? You need to get range of motion. I think some of it was misguided, though, of really putting too much focus of talking about the lunging and the walking lunges, because let's be honest here. If you're at a point to where a walking lunge with dumbbells is really a particularly effective quad exercise for you in general, you probably are just not doing enough squatting. You're probably not very strong yet. Kind of comes back over to the other point. I'm not saying one-legged exercises don't have their place. I utilize very heavily a one-legged exercise. In fact, at this point for me, my step-ups onto a high box exceed my squatting volume because I'm using them to develop my quads and I use them for my GBP work. But you should be squatting deep. And the thing that did kind of bother me is that he's trying to talk to guys about squatting deep and squatting, and then I kept seeing him demonstrating using a very, very narrow stance to show some of this. And it's like, Jeremy, get that stance out wider. There's no reason for you guys to be doing a narrow stance squat. Right? If you're actually trying to get big and strong, your minimum is shoulder width. Right, your minimum is shoulder width, and ideally, for certain purposes, we may want to work on getting a lot wider. Right, if you want to be particularly athletic or do powerlifting or sports, you're going to need to learn to utilize a wider stance. It would behoove you to do so. It will carry over to the other things that you do. But in general, a lot of it just has to do with just total lack of training volume and lack of range of motion. It's just not enough work being done. And that's where this has been overcomplicated. And what I mean is that if you actually are training athletically, which is why I say things like conjugate work for everybody, I agree with Louis Simmons. This is the point I've come around to. It really is just the best way to train all the way around. Doesn't matter what sport you're going to compete in. The system works. But the whole point here is that if you're doing squatting twice a week, even off of deep boxes, you're doing all this work, you do some quad specific work, and you're doing your plyometric work, you're doing your general physical preparedness or metcon work, your quads are going to get jacked, right? It's just not possible for you to do tons of heavy box squatting and speed squats and jumps, weighted jumps, and then your metabolic conditioning work and not get jacked quads. Okay, it's going to happen by default. It doesn't require you to do a lot of specific work. Now, in my case, as a raw squatter, because I want to put another 50 or 80 pounds on my raw squat and I'm above a 500-pound squatter already, I need quad-specific work. And so how do we address that? We don't sit there and go, well, let me find a way to lunge or do a one-legged exercise that removes my glutes. No, I might as well grow my glutes with it. That's one of the big mistakes people make, is just thinking that I need to find a way to make it less glute dominant. No, don't worry about it being glute dominant. Let your booty grow, guys. In fact, do more glute work. It'll give you more workload on even the one-legged exercises. You'll be stronger. In my case, I go into a deep squat position doing one-legged step-ups, right? I do them for conditioning with body weight. I do them on my actual heavy day with a barbell on my back, but I step up onto a 20-inch box. Right, that is taller than the bench that you guys are benching on. I step onto a 20-inch box with one leg and stand into the air up onto it. And I alternate legs. Right, for me that works great. Could you replicate that with various walking lunges or split squats? Sure, you could get a very, very similar effect. They're relatively interchangeable. But no matter what you do with it, you do need to get a relatively deep knee angle. And you're going to need to do a lot of workload. Right, because this doesn't have the same sort of tension. You don't have the same fatigue and recovery issues that you would have from doing a normal back squat, even if you put the weight on your back. So yeah, any of those are acceptable. That's what I happen to choose. That's what I like. That's what I program. But the others are all acceptable, and I know some amazing coaches who feel they're all relatively interchangeable, but you're going to have to put some actual work in, not this, well, I'm just going to grab a 10-pound dumbbell and just leisurely. No, you're going to need to actually put some real tension on the quad. Put some work in. Focus on getting a deep stretch on it, the full range of motion, because you can on this exercise. It works the entire quad, particularly the lower part, and put in some training volume in addition to doing your heavy work on your squats. Right? That will generally resolve the problem of people not having quads. And it really isn't so complicated that you need to put a lot of focus on things like foam rolling your calves and large amounts of dorsiflexion work, because in all honesty, if you're just training under load, yes, you can do some of that early on, but it really isn't that critical. I know he said, well, I think more lifters need to do this. No, out of shape people need to do this. If you're training things like this to a correct full range of motion regularly, doing enough correct training, the training itself builds the mobility for all that, right? I don't have any of my lifters do large amounts of stretching or anything else. We build their mobility doing the exercises, squatting to a deep box, sumo pulls, all this. This is how we build all their mobility. And when you do these things under load, you can use progressive range of motion with stance, progressively deeper boxes. You can use your actual training itself to build the mobility. It really isn't that difficult. People want to overcomplicate these things more than they need to be when we're dealing with something relatively simple, and that's we can progressively increase mobility. We need to progressively load these things, and you simply need to put in a lot of hard work. And that's ultimately the other reason a lot of guys don't have quads, is that they're just basically lazy. Right? Just call it what it is. They don't train hard. They're not willing to actually put in the work. That's usually the biggest reason for it. Right? Nothing more, nothing less. Lack of frequency, lack of hard work, lack of range of motion. These are all resolvable. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.